Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the Messengers in Our Home. Dear Kardec Radio listeners, welcome back to the Messengers in Our Home. Tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 35, Home Worship. And it's that weekly meeting that we are all invited to start or do in our homes with our families or by ourselves to get spiritual protection for our home, to elevate the vibrations, the energies, the thought patterns that we have around us. And so we're going to learn a little bit more how one family does it. And it's the invitation for us to learn more about it, as Mackenzie will tell you later, and to start doing it. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another chapter of the Messengers in Our Home.
So, as usual, before we start, we take a moment, letting go of our days, and elevating our thoughts to the higher spheres. Dear Mother, Father God, Creator of the universe, of us, and of everything else, we thank you so much for the gift of life that you have given us, this opportunity of being incarnated on this beautiful planet to learn and to grow, to struggle, to succeed, and above all to learn to love you above anything else and our neighbors as ourselves. We thank you for your constant presence in our lives, through your messengers, the good spirits as well, our guardian angels, our beloved ones who are on the other side of life at the moment. And so we thank you for this opportunity of studying virtually with people from all over the world, connecting us as part of the universal family, bringing this knowledge, this wisdom about life in the spiritual realm, and the connection, communication between incarnates and discarnates, how we influence each other, how we can learn from each other, and how we receive help whenever we need it, and whenever we are open to it too. So, with your permission, we would like to start our meeting, and so be it. Here we are, the reading of Chapter 35. Enjoy.
Chapter 35, Home Worship. In the early hours of evening, Donna Isabel left her needlepoint and invited the little ones to the home worship service. Noting the interest that the children had sparked in me, Aniceto explained. The girls are friends from No Solar. They have reincarnated for spiritual work and redemption. The same is not true of the little boy, however. He has come from a lower region of the spirit world. In fact, I had perceived the situation exactly. The boy was not clothed in luminous substance, and he accepted his mother's invitation not as one who is happy to do so, but as one who is simply doing as told. They all sat so naturally around the table that I perceived that this blessed family custom had been a long-standing practice in the home. The oldest child, Joaninha, brought notebooks and newspaper clippings. The widow sat at the head of the table, and, after meditating for a few moments, she asked little 9-year-old Nellie to say the opening prayer, asking Jesus for spiritual enlightenment. All the invisible workers sat down respectfully. Isidoro and a few of the couple's closest friends sat next to Dona Isabel. Nearly all of them could be seen and heard by her. As soon as the worship service began, the background lighting became more intense. A deep sense of peace enveloped my heart. Little Nellie said the prayer in a moving voice.
O Lord, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If it is your holy plan for us to receive more light, then enable us, O Lord, to gain more understanding from this gospel study. Give us bread for our souls and the water of life eternal. Be in our hearts now and forever. Amen.
Dona Isabel then asked her to read some instructive and comforting words, and then something interesting from the regular news. Joaninha did so, reading a short chapter from an instructional spiritist book about imprudence, and then a sad event from the secular newspaper. Isidoro's firstborn, a very sweet and affable girl, looked quite upset. The clipping was about a young girl in a distant neighborhood who had committed suicide. The reporter had described the scene in graphic detail. Joaninha trembled, grief-stricken. As soon as she had finished, Dona Isabel opened the New Testament as if at random, but I saw that, on our plane, Isidoro was in fact intervening in the process, influencing the topic that was to be focused on that evening. She gazed at the small page and said,
The verse for today, my children, is from chapter 13 of the Gospel of St. Matthew.
She read verse 31 out loud.
He told them another parable, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field.
I then witnessed an interesting incident. A spirit friend, whom I recognized to be of a very high order by his resplendent apparel, placed his right hand on the selfless widow's forehead. Before I could ask him, Aniceto explained in an almost inaudible voice, This is our brother Fabio Aleto. He is going to give the spiritual interpretation of the text. Those who are at his level will be able to hear his thoughts, but those who are in a lower mental zone will receive an interpretation of it, as will the incarnates. In other words, we will receive the spiritual light of Fabio's words in the translation of Isabel's materialized words. Our mentor could not have been more explicit. He had summed up the complex lesson in only a few words. I noticed that Isidoro's widow had entered into deep concentration for a few moments, as if she were absorbing the light encircling her. Then, with an extraordinary firm gaze, she began her commentary.
My children, today we have read some words about imprudence and a news item about a suicide under very sad circumstances. The newspaper clipping states that the young girl killed herself because she was so much in love. However, from what we have been learning, we know that no one commits a wrong out of true love. Those who truly love are cultivators of life. They never spread death. The poor girl was ill, disturbed, and imprudent. She gave in to passion, which confounds reason and debases the sentiment. And we know that it is only a small step from passion to suffering or death. Even so, let's remember this unknown friend with thoughts of fraternal sympathy. May Jesus watch over her on new pathways. We are not criticizing an act which only the Lord can judge, but a fact from which we must extract the right lessons. The Gospel message this evening, the word of our Divine Master to his disciples, affirms that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in the field of his heart. We must see in this action, my children, a lesson about the smallest things. The physical realm where we live is filled with imprudence of every sort. Few people even begin to reflect seriously about life and duty until they are on their deathbed. As for our lesson tonight, we mustn't concentrate solely on this young woman who committed suicide under such tragic conditions. In every neighborhood there are men and women with great responsibilities, but who display disastrous and destructive passions in the area of the sentiments, in business and in social relationships. There are minds unbalanced by imprudence in nearly every part of this world. We have been careless about the smallest of things. The ocean is large, the drop of water is tiny. But the ocean is nothing more than a mass of drops gathered together. Using divine symbolism, our Master tells us about the mustard seed. Let's remember that the field of our heart is filled with thorny weeds that have dwelled there, perhaps for many centuries, in a terrible wasteland. So of course we should not expect a miraculous harvest. It is essential to tend the soil and care for what has been planted. The mustard seed that Jesus refers to is a person's gesture, word or thought. There are many people who speak a lot about humility, but they never show a gesture of obedience. We will never experience goodness without beginning to be good. We must do some little thing before we can build big things. The Lord often taught us, the kingdom of heaven is within us. Well, it is there within ourselves that we must develop the ultimate work of divine accomplishment, without which we will be nothing more than highly imprudent individuals. The forest also began with tiny seeds, and spiritually speaking, we have lived in the dense forest of ills created by ourselves due to our carelessness in choosing spiritual seeds. The conversation of 1 hour, the thought of one day, the gesture of one moment can represent a great deal in our lives. Let's be careful with the little things and select the mustard seeds of the kingdom of heaven. Let's remember that Jesus taught nothing needlessly. Every time we take these mustard seeds according to the divine word and sow them in the field within us, we will receive all the help we need from the Lord. He will show us the blessings, the sun of eternal love, the sublime vitality of the higher plane. Our sowing will grow, and in a short time we will achieve higher spiritual accomplishments. My children, let us learn the signs of how to begin, remembering Jesus' goodness at all times. The Master does not forsake us. He lovingly follows us and inspires our hearts. Above all, let us have confidence and joy.
I noticed that Fabio had withdrawn his hand from the widow's forehead, and that she had begun to meditate like someone whose thought was fading away into the distance. There was great emotion in the assembly, invisible to the children who, in their turn, also seemed impressed. Dona Isabel again looked at her children maternally and said,
"Now let's talk for a bit."
So tonight we're talking about chapter 35, Home Worship. And as an introduction, I would like to invite everyone that has been following us either here every Wednesday on the Messengers in Our Home, or previously on No Solar in Our Home, to know that before No Solar in Our Home, our very first gathering was about the book Jesus in the Home. And the whole story of the Jesus in the Home book is about home worships, or as we like to call, or some people like to call, gospel in the home or God at home. So it's this gathering where we sit together with our family and friends that are together in the house at the moment to read a passage either from the Gospel According to Spiritism or any other book that has good and inspiring messages, so that we can discuss the contents and bring those messages into our own hearts and bring those ideas to our daily lives. So we had a whole program or a whole series discussing every chapter of the book Jesus in the Home here, me and Francisca, and we made it in a format more or less just like this home worship that we're gonna talk about here in this program. So if you want to go back and check that out, you can just simply go to KardecRadio.com, and you will find there in the section audiobooks, and you will find the whole list of all the programs that we recorded, and you will be able to see our discussions in the format of a home worship. Not completely exactly like this one here that we're going to discuss because, well, it's more people and have kids and so on, but it's a very good introduction if you still don't know how to do your home worship. But hopefully after tonight, after this chapter, you will be able to see how simple it is. And, well, not only this chapter, right? This one is 35, but on chapter 36, we continue discussing the home worship. So today we start with the prayer, and then next chapter, the last words of chapter 36, which we will talk about next week, will end with a prayer. So as a brief recap, last week we had chapter 34, in which we were introduced to this new family that we're going to talk and live with for a while here. And then we met Isidoro, we met Donna Isabel, we met her children, and we know that place, it's a workshop where workers from No Solar come to either help the family, but also to get energies and to rest so that they can go out and do some more work to needy spirits who are being received or are being transported to No Solar, and so on and so forth. So it's a workshop or a working station there for Aniceto, and now Andre and Vicente will be able to stay there for a while to see how things work and so on. But then the very first thing that we're going to have is this home worship, right? And it's this meeting with the family to talk and discuss about the words of God, right? About the teachings that Jesus brought to us, and so that we know how to act well or have better thoughts during our day-to-day lives. And when we discuss and when we think about our problems, and we don't necessarily bring those problems to the table to keep discussing in negative terms, but to think about those issues so that we can maybe be inspired by good spirits and by the message, so that we can have better thoughts on the issues that we are living and going through at that specific moment in time. So Donna Isabel was working with the needle point, and then she stops and invite all the little ones, right, all her daughters and sons, to go to the home worship. And then, because of Andres' curiosity, he says that the children had sparked in him a certain interest. Aniceto comes and explains to him and to us that those girls, Donna Isabel's daughters, are friends from No Solar, that they had reincarnated for spiritual work and redemption, but that the boy, Donna Isabel's son, is not at the same level. And he says that he, the boy, has come from a lower region of the spirit world. So the boy does not share the same interests as the girls. And we will see much more about this relationship between the girls, the boy, and Donna Isabel when we go on to next chapter 36. So as of right now, this information is really important for us to really know and maybe understand some of the differences that we're going to have and that we have in our own families, depending on how many children and how many people are in our circle in the circle of our house, of our home. And if we extend, we can extend this to our relationships in our work, with our extended family, and so on and so forth. So Andre explains to us that he had perceived this, and maybe that was where his interest on the children had come from, because he says that the boy was not clothed in luminous substance, and he accepted his mother's invitation not as one who is happy to do so, but as one who is simply doing as told. And this, we need to take a look and see where our interest is in things of the world, right? And then we will know how far we are from really being that spirit that we want to become. This is not to disencourage, actually is the other way around, is to encourage us just to see that once we improve, we will start emitting more, let's say, loving fluids around us, and then these loving fluids will become more luminous to those around us. The same way when we approach a person that is more loving and caring, we feel better once we are close to that person. Hopefully that's what we want and where we want to go and what we want to achieve, right? To go and little by little transform what we are, and spiritually we will be seen differently because of what we actually are, and not just because of our exterior appearance, meaning our clothes or the way we dress. But naturally, and if we take just a little bit of time to think about the way we look when we are incarnated, we can clearly see that some people are happier, right? Or have a happier face, or have a way of behaving, of walking that inspire us confidence, right? That inspire us this love. And naturally, it's not because of the beauty of their faces or the beauty, exterior beauty of their bodies, but it's something that comes from the inside, right? And we all say this, and we all probably had experienced that before. A person who, let's say, just had a baby and it's very, very happy with the family and so on, the person seems more beautiful. The person seems more lively. And that's what we're talking about. And if even when incarnated, even when in our body, we can perceive and we can exhale this aura, if we can use this word, of love and care, can you imagine how it is in our spirits? I mean, how it is when we are discarnated, when we don't have the physical body that inhibits all this luminous substance, right? So what Andre is saying here is that even incarnated, he sees in the boy something that's different than what he sees in the girls, meaning that the girls had already achieved this change within herself, right, and within themselves. On the other hand, the boy still didn't achieve this, so he is a rebellious spirit, and we will see, like I said, more about him further down the book, especially beginning next chapter 36. But and then, well, after all this, they sat around the table, and they know where they sit, and they know what they're going to do. And the oldest child, Andre describes, Joaninha, brought notebooks and newspaper clippings. This is something that I'd like to comment, which it is not very common, at least in my personal experience, right, to bring things that we took note during the week, or things that we saw or read throughout the week, so that we could discuss in the home worship. But this is actually a very good thing, especially if we have children, but naturally for everybody, because we can use news, we can use things that we lived throughout that week, so that we can reflect upon those things, but not to bring us down, actually the other way around, to see that things happen in the world. So we cannot be apart from things that happen in the world. So we have to be aware that some things are happening around us, but we need to bring those matters, if we bring those matters, to reflect together with the message that are being read at that night, at that specific moment. And that's what we're going to hear, right? That's what we're going to discuss a little bit here. We all heard the reading of the chapter, so we already know what's going to happen. So then they sit at the table, and Dona Isabel asks the 9-year-old Nelly to say the opening prayer, asking Jesus for spiritual enlightenment. So when this was said, all the invisible workers sat down respectfully. Isidoro was there, and they all sat close to Dona Isabel, and all of them, or probably almost all of them, could be seen and heard by her, saying that she is a medium and she can see the spiritual gathering around that table or in the house at that specific moment. Naturally, not all of us will be able to see this. Not all of us will be able to notice specific spirits, but once we start doing this with more frequency, every week at the same time, at the same places, if we can do so, we will start to increase our perception, not of the specific spirits who are there, but of the environment, how different the environment is once we start doing this every single week and making this become a regular meeting. So and why is that? And the explanation, although not said specifically here, but it's because the spirits will notice that there's this effort going there, and that every week at the same time we will be gathering there. So the spirit, the invisible workers, will notice the light that's coming from there, and will start arriving and asking permission to participate, so that they can all refuel and help us refuel together with them. So there will be an environment of good spirits surrounding us, just as it happens here with Dona Isabel. So the home worship begins, and Andre describes that the background lighting become more intense. This deep sense of peace invades his heart, and Nelly said the prayer in a moving voice. And it's a very beautiful prayer said by a 9-year-old, to which she to some degree, right, touches a little bit upon the Lord's Prayer, and she asks the good spirits, and she asks God to be in their hearts now and forever, right? And she asks for the water of life eternal, showing that she is one of, as Aniceto described, she is one of those friends of Nosolar. Naturally, she learned this from her mother. But as we already said, the older boy, right? He is 12, and he probably had the same education as the other girls. But if asked to be a prayer, I would really much doubt that he would be able to say a prayer, a simple prayer like this, but with these kind of words, right? When she, for example, says, "Give us bread for our souls and the water of life eternal, and be in our hearts now and forever. Amen." So it is interesting that she was able to capture these teachings. And why is that? It's because she already acquired that, right? Through not being rebellious, for example, but also by building her own inner life throughout the other lives that she had, to which we will see once again that the older boy, at least older than her, she is 9, the boy is 12, and he will not be able to perceive and to notice this. And then after the prayer, Dona Isabel asks Joaninha, which is the oldest of the bunch, right, the oldest daughter of the bunch, to read some instructive and comforting words. So what Joaninha does is, as we said before, she got a clipping from a secular newspaper, right, from a regular newspaper, and she was a little bit upset by that news, and probably that was why she brought that news clipping that told us the story of a young girl in a distant neighborhood of where they lived that committed suicide. And the reporter described the scene in graphic detail. Naturally, Andre doesn't describe this. He only gives us the overview of what it is, so that we don't need to talk about in details these things, because it doesn't help, right? We need to know what it is, but then rapidly move on from the details of the fact to the fact in itself and discuss. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this as well in this chapter. So as soon as she had finished, Dona Isabel opens the New Testament, right? Opens the Bible on the part of where we have Jesus' histories and stories and teachings. And she says, Andra says that it is as if at random. But what Andra sees from the spiritual plane is that Isidoro was actually interfering with that opening at random, right, to try to influence the topic. And how so, right? We may think that, oh, he is moving the pages, or he is... no, probably not. Probably just giving a little bit of a touch in her hands, right? We already know that she is a medium, right? And we are all mediums. So maybe he can just give her a little bit of a touch, and then she stops right there and hopefully open at that specific page. It's not always that this happens. It's not always that this can happen, for a lot of different reasons, right? Sometimes the book is already, let's say, rigged, because we opened so many times in the same lesson that it will keep opening in the same lesson, just because it's easier for the physical book to do so. But depending on how much we are connected to the good spirits, this will and can really happen in our day-to-day lives. So another way of doing this is not expecting this random thing to work, but if we really want to study, let's say, the whole book, the whole Gospel according to Spiritism, a different way of doing this is just going through from beginning to end. So you start at the introduction, and every week you read the following passage, for example. Or if you want to read a different book and see different topics, just get another book and then go chapter by chapter, and so on and so forth. So this is not something that's set in stone, right? It's what we feel at that specific time, but so that we don't keep receiving the same message every time. And sometimes to some people this can be, let's say, boring. We go from a message to the next one, so that we can read the whole thing, right, and study the whole thing. In this case here, no. In this case, because of that, maybe because of the clipping, they wanted to try to see if they could match the clipping with a teaching, so that they could study that fact that happened through the lens of the good word of our dear Master Jesus, right? And then, so Donna Isabel opens the book and she gazes at the small page and she says, "The verse for today, my children, is from chapter 13 of the Gospel of Matthew." And she reads verse 31 out loud. And the verse says, "He told them another parable, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field." So, once she reads that, Andre tells us that he witnesses an interesting incident. Another spirit who was with them at the room at that time, and he recognized him to be of a very high order because of his envelopment, right? And he says, because of his resplendent apparel, placed his right hand on the selfless widow's forehead. So the spirit comes, approaches Donna Isabel, and puts his hand on her forehead. Aniceto, before Andre could ask him, explained to him in an almost inaudible voice. And I'm going to read because this is really interesting what he says. Quote, "That is our brother Fabio Aletto. He is going to give the spiritual interpretation of the text. Those who are at his level will be able to hear his thoughts, but those who are in a lower mental zone will receive an interpretation of it, as will the incarnates. In other words, we will receive the spiritual light of Fabio's words in the translation of Isabel's materialized words." So, end quote. So what's going to happen here, and if we can perceive that this can also happen to us when we are, let's say, giving a lecture at the Spiritist Center, or when we are in a work at the Spiritist Center where another person is giving us an instruction, and if we are at that moment, right, completely connected with the good spirits, really striving to do our best work, there will be spirits that are there that can help us, and they will help us to take the most out of what we are doing, and help us sometimes inspire us, sometimes say something that could and can be taken out of what I already know. So this is not for us to, let's say, oh, I never studied this, and then I'll go give a lecture about this topic, and then a spirit will come and will help me. Well, there can be this case. However, the spirit can only take something and can help us and be more helpful to us if we had already studied that part, and then they can inspire us to remember something, to take something out of that passage that I already heard before, that I already studied before. So what the Fabio Aletto is doing here is that he is giving to the spirits that are in the level of perceiving it in the spiritual world, his personal interpretation. And due to his personal interpretation, whatever Donna Isabel can capture from what he is saying or from what he is thinking, she will translate those words that he is saying or he is inspiring her, and she will say it as herself. She will notice and translate it. So it is as if we are translating a passage from a book in Portuguese to English. We are going to adapt, right, some of the words because of the expressions or because of the amount of knowledge that I have on that specific language, for example, right? So, and naturally, every person will say it differently. Why? Because we know different things. We have different stories within ourselves that we can tell and that we can relate to. That's why Andres says, after what Aniceto tells him, that his mentor could not have been more explicit. He had summed up the complex lesson in only a few words. So it is interesting that he says that because he was able to understand it. Right? He was able to understand that what Donna Isabel is going to say to the incarnates, naturally the children, will need to be adapted to the children. And she will not be able, Donna Isabel will not be able to say word by word, and more specifically because this is not a mediumistic communication. And even if it were a mediumistic communication, depending on how the medium is and how much he or she had practiced the mediumship, she could or he could not transmit the whole thing word by word as the spirit would be saying. So it is interesting for us to think about this, because depending on the level that we are, we will perceive differently the same texts that we are reading or that we are listening to. And that's basically what he is telling us, and Iseto is telling and teaching Andre and teaching us here. So after having said that, then we have the commentary of the passage, right? And naturally, what she's going to teach us here is not just talking about the passage of the gospel. She will make comments with regards to the passage of the gospel in the clipping, so we can understand how the passage relates to what we had heard during the week, and in her case, right, in her family's case, to what one of the girls heard or read throughout the week, so that they can reflect and think about, okay, how can I apply this to my life? How can we apply this to our personal lives? So, and then that's why she starts with the clipping, right? And she says that we read some words about imprudence, and a news item about a suicide under very sad circumstances. I forgot to mention that when she asked Joaninha to read the news item, she also asked her to read a small passage, and she doesn't mention what passage of which book it was, but now we know, and we knew that at the time, that the message was talking about how we are sometimes imprudent with our own actions. So Donna Isabel makes us notice something very important about the reading of the news clipping, that the young girl killed herself because she was so much in love, to which she will correct, right, that those who are really, really in love, they never commit a wrongdoing, right? So what happens is, if we think that we are in love, that we love another person, and we do something wrong, it's because we still didn't understand what true love really is. And when we are talking about love here, and when she talks about love here, we're not talking about passion, right? We're not talking about being in love with another person, because this is something that is true. It happens to our bodies. It can show us a connection that we have to that other soul that we say that we are in love with. But then we still didn't understand what true love really is, right? And naturally, we are imperfect while on earth, and it's far from us to really love one another. And that's why still we commit those unfortunate acts that we are still doing and performing in our own lives. And she goes on and says, well, those who truly love are cultivators of life. They never spread death. And this is a teaching for all of us, right? If we are thinking of doing something that's terrible and spreading death instead of cultivating life, it's a good advice or a good indicator that we still didn't understand what true love really is. And she says, right, the poor girl was ill, disturbed, and imprudent. She gave in to passion, which confounds reason and debases the sentiments. And unfortunately, because of what and who we still are, and if we still are here on earth, fighting the fight, right? Fighting the days, we are still imperfect. And this is something that can happen to all of us. I mean, not the suicide part, but I mean the part that we're still learning what is to love, right? And we need to understand this, that we can get ill, we can get sick, we can do imprudent things sometimes, we can be disturbed by actions of other people, and we need to be careful about it. We need to be thinking about these things so that our sentiments are not debased. I mean, our sentiments are not taken away from us because of an action of another person. And unfortunately, that when this happens, if we allow it to happen, we don't know what road we're going to walk in from that moment. So it is important for us to be aware of these situations so that we can be, if something like this can be happening in our lives, so that we can be aware at least a little bit before so that we can prepare. And how do we prepare to this? For example, this reading that we are doing right now is a good awakening, right? It's a good wake-up call for all of us. So I already know this. I'm already reading about it. So if one day this starts to happen, I can say, hey, wow, I remember reading about this before. So I'm a little bit, if not completely, but I'm at least a little bit prepared to stop before it can go further and further down the road. So it is important for us to take everything that we read and learn from that mistake or from that situation, so that if it happens to us, we can already have a ledger, right? We can already have started to run so that we can act better than the story that we read before. And it's interesting what she says to finalize this beginning of her explanation, that we need, when we read something like this about a person, about a situation, that we can emit, right, thoughts of fraternal sympathy, and to ask Jesus to envelop that person in his love. Because sometimes when we start reading these things, we start to judge and we start to emit bad thoughts because we act or we judge the other person or we judge the act. To which she finalizes by saying, and I'm going to quote, she says, quote, "We are not criticizing an act which only the Lord can judge, but a fact from which we must extract the right lesson." Unquote. So it is very important for us, if we are reading a news clipping, if we are watching the news, the telecast, right, on the television, if we are reading something on the internet, if we are listening to a person telling us a story, that we don't rush to judge the other person, but that we can listen to that story, take the story in, and extract the lesson from that story to my personal life. What would I do, right, if it were me? What can I do now to help? Well, if I can't do anything physically to help, I can at least send good thoughts, say a prayer to that person or to that committed the act, be it a robbery, be it a suicide like this one, or any other thing, right? So don't criticize the act, right? Extract the right lesson from the fact, from what really happened. And then she moves to the gospel message of this evening, right? When that she read, right? That the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in the field of his heart. And to what she will explain, and naturally, maybe we already know this, right? That the mustard seed in Jesus' teaching is that from a small action, right, we can do something really big, right? And naturally, the other way is the same thing. Sometimes it's from a very small act that we can build a very bad thing later on. And that's where she starts. She starts by the end, telling us that the physical realm where we live is filled with imprudence of every sort, right? And that us, or very few people, begin to reflect seriously about life and duty until they are on their deathbed. So we don't start to reflect about our real lives, right? Our inner lives, once we are very close to the end. So it is the end. It is the full plant, or the plant fully developed, not the seed, the mustard seed from the beginning. Then she says, well, what we are hearing about the story of this young woman who committed suicide, it's just one small thing. But in every neighborhood, everywhere, there are men and women with great responsibility, but that don't reflect that their small actions, their small disastrous and destructive passions in the area of sentiments, in business and in social relationships, are something that will be planted and unfortunately will grow with time. And she uses a metaphor. She employs a metaphor of the ocean, and she says the ocean is large, the drop of water is tiny, but what is the ocean if not the gathering of all the tiny drops of water gathered together, right? So Jesus then uses the idea of the mustard seed to make us understand that we are responsible, if not for the whole ocean, but at least for the drops of water that are surrounding me, where I am going to enter, right? If I drop, right, my drop of water in my family, and I am the one who wants to change something for the better, I am responsible for that part. And hopefully my family, once it gets structured, can help other drops of water, or other families around ourselves, to also do the best that they can do, right? So unfortunately, because of how many times we lived and how many times we did weird things in our lives, and we planted different types of seeds, what is growing inside of ourselves? What is growing inside of our hearts? What is growing and inside of our wastelands, right, that we did not take care of throughout the times? That's what she is asking ourselves here. And then we planted a lot of different seeds in the past, and what do we want to harvest now, if not what we planted in the past? How can I plant a seed of a watermelon and expect to harvest grapes, for example? Right? It's not going to happen. So here is the same thing. And then she says, the mustard seed that Jesus refers to is a person's gesture, word, or thought. There are many people who speak a lot about humility, but they never show a gesture of obedience. So how come, right, we want the world to be a better place, to be a kinder place, if we are not kind? And what we are saying here is not that, oh, we are not kind to other people, let's say in our work. No, we are not kind with people within our families. We are not kind to people within our circles. So it is interesting for us to think about this, right? That this mustard seed is not for the others. This mustard seed is for ourselves. And then she says, quote, we will never experience goodness without beginning to be good. We must do some little thing before we can build big things, unquote. Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is within ourselves. And, well, if it is there where we need to plant what we need to grow, what we want to grow. What are we doing there? What types of seeds I am planting? We are planting inside that kingdom of heaven that's inside of ourselves. Because it is interesting that when we say, well, the kingdom of heaven, right? And then we think that once we get there, we will not have to work, or it is all ready for us, right? It is completely ready for us to live, and everything will be perfect and everything. Well, it will if I work, if I do something to harvest there, right? To get there, to get from there. Jesus says at one point, right? I work, and my Father also still work. So if Jesus is still working, God is still working, why do we expect that being imperfect as we are, we don't need to work? And sometimes if I think that I need to work, I have to ask myself, what am I working on then? What types of seeds I am planting? What types of fruits do I want to harvest, right? Oh, I love blueberries, but I'm planting cranberries. How, right? So it is funny to some degree that we don't pay attention to these things, right? If I want the world to be more gentle, right, I need to be gentle myself. I need to be kind. I need to be more loving. And we all know that, right? We all, I don't see a person that doesn't understand this, be it a person of a religious background or not. But it is interesting that we still don't practice this, right? That we still don't practice what we preach or what we actually understand. And she says, the forest also began with tiny seeds, right? So what is the kind of forest that we are planting in this kingdom of heaven, right? What is do I want different types of plants? Great, let's plant different types of seeds, right? But if I'm only planting the bad seeds or the seeds of stuff that I don't like that will destroy my plantation, destroy my field, God doesn't say, hey, don't plant it. He or she looks at us and says, hey, you're free. You can do whatever you want to do. But remember, what you plant is what you will harvest, right? So that's what we unfortunately sometimes plant. And that's what she says. Spiritually speaking, we have lived in the dense forest of ills created by ourselves due to our carelessness in choosing spiritual seeds. What are we doing, spiritually speaking, with the spiritual seeds that we have been receiving? Are we only storing them and not planting them? Because we have been reading books, right? We have been studying Spiritism or studying another religion, studying the good teachings of other philosophers, of other great thinkers, of other religious leaders. What are we doing with those seeds? What are we doing with those teachings? She goes on. The conversation of 1 hour, the thought of one day, the gesture of one moment can represent a great deal in our lives. Let's be careful with the little things and select the mustard seeds of the kingdom of heaven. Let's select those seeds and let's start using those seeds in our daily lives, planting them as we move along. Jesus didn't teach anything to be thrown away. Everything he said had a specific need. Every time, she says, we take these mustard seeds and sow them in the field within us, we will receive all the help we need from the Lord. He will shower us with blessings, the sun of eternal love, the sublime vitality of the higher planes. We need to learn to take those seeds and plant. And as with every seed that we plant, the harvest is not immediate. It takes time to grow. If we are already harvesting something is not of what we just planted. We had planted what we are harvesting right now, maybe hundreds of years ago, maybe even throughout this life, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago. We are harvesting right now. And what we are planting right now, we will only start harvesting a few days from now at least, or sometimes a few years from now, sometimes in a different lifetime. What we cannot do is not plant. We need to start changing the seeds that we've been planting for a long time in our lives and using the good seeds, the divine words, the words of goodness that we learn, and using them as seeds to plant a better future for ourselves, for our children, and for our children's children. So let us learn the science of how to begin. Let us all have confidence and joy in our dear Master and friend Jesus' words. We will harvest goodness if we start now, if we hadn't already started to plant the seeds of goodness. That's basically what she said. Naturally, as we said in the beginning, we don't know exactly what words were hers, which words were Fabio's, but this is a mixture of what we can understand. Maybe a person who is more spiritually elevated than I am, than we are, will and would say much better than what we just said, would say much better than what Dona Isabel said, would have said much better than what Fabio said. But if that's what we can gather from this, that's what we need to understand so that we can keep moving, can keep working, can keep planting, right? So this is a very, very interesting teaching for all of us, for us to really keep going with our seeds and planting the seeds as we go along within the soil, or in the soil of the kingdom of heaven that's in ourselves, that's in our lives. After she finishes, Fabio withdraws his hand from the widow's forehead, and she starts to think about what she was saying, meditating about those things that she said, as she feels that those memories and those emotions that Fabio was transmitting to her were fading away into the distance. Everybody was emotional, including her kids, but especially the spirits who were around there, because of what they had heard, because of what they had felt. And then, to finalize this first moment, Dona Isabel looks at her children with that love of a mother for her daughters and sons, and then she says, "Now, let's talk for a bit." And we reach the end of the chapter. We had talked for a while now, and next week we will continue our conversation about this home worship, where Dona Isabel and her children discuss a little bit more about their behavior and what they need to do while living here on earth and living through the problems and the difficulties of the incarnate life. So I hope seeing you all here next week so that we can finish this home worship with Dona Isabel and her family in the messengers in our home. Have a great week, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.